Three logical outworkings developed out of these choices. Number one is this: ladies and gentlemen, it is possible for one person to lead millions into untold evil. Think about it. I know that's only a half truth, and the other half will come. It's possible for one person to lead millions into untold evil. I remember the day I was given in the 80s to speak at the Center for Geopolitical Strategy in Moscow and the Lenin Military Academy. They'd never had an address by a theist before. And I was sitting surrounded by a total classroom full of atheists. It was a nerve-wracking 2 hours. And then went to the Center for Geopolitical Strategy in Moscow at the invitation of the chairman of the philosophy department, 4 stories above ground, 8 stories below ground. All of their great heroes lining the walls in their pictures. And my wife and my colleague and I was in the hot seat for over 3 hours with all of these thunderbolts of atheistic thought hurled in my direction to bring a defense of theism and more particularly of the Christian faith. And as it had come to an end, you could begin to see the pillars of atheism beginning to collapse just by the examination of its logical outworkings. And the head of the department, a general by the name of Kirshen, took me out for dinner along with my wife. And I leaned over and I said to him, General Kirshen, I want to talk to you for 5 minutes and get your feedback about Joseph Stalin. I said, you're the resident historian. Stalin was a seminary student going into the ministry, and he turned his back upon God and ushered in that era of strong anti-theistic thinking. And he nodded. I said, as a matter of fact, the great British journalist Malcolm Muggeridge told me that Svetlana Stalin, Stalin's daughter, told him in a BBC interview that she was standing by her father's bedside while he was dying, hallucinating, waving his hands as if wolves were coming at him. And Svetlana said, the last thing my father did was half sit up in bed, clench his fist to the heavens one more time, threw his head back on the pillow, and he was gone. It's now been documented by Paul Johnson, the historian. And I said, General Kirshen, a Western dignitary came to visit Joseph Stalin and asked him how long he expected to be torturing his people and still getting away with it. I said, Joseph Stalin didn't say a word. He called the waiter and asked him to bring a live chicken. And he started to defeather that bird. The bird winced to break free from his clasp. And finally, this denuded chicken was put onto the ground, and Stalin picked a piece of bread and walked away. And the chicken hobbled over towards him, nestled between his trouser legs. Stalin bent down with his open palm and the bread in his hand, and the chicken started to peck away at it. Stalin said to her, do you have your answer? You torture a chicken, it'll follow you for food the rest of its life. People are like that chicken. You torture them, and they will follow you for food the rest of their lives. I said, General Kirshen, he eliminated 15 million of your people. Please respond to me as a historian. I promise you what I tell you is true. General Kirshen's lip began to quiver. He was about to put a spoonful of food into his mouth, and the tears began to run down his face. God gave me the privilege of seeing General Kirshen come to Christ and recognize that the entailments of your belief in God are diametrically proportionate to who that God is and what that character of God is. Ladies and gentlemen, it's possible for one person to lead millions into untold evil. I've done a series of books on imaginary conversations. The first one was Jesus Talks to Buddha, the lotus and the cross. The second one was Sense and Sensuality, Jesus Talks to Oscar Wilde. The third one was The Lamb and the Fuhrer, Jesus Talks to Adolf Hitler. And I went to Nuremberg, did my research and studied all of that. on Hitler's life. You know, when you walk into Auschwitz, you see a sign by Adolf Hitler. I want to raise a generation of young people devoid of a conscience, imperious, relentless, and cruel. He changed history. One man. But number two, the reason that happens is not because one person is able to lead millions into untold evil. The reason that often happens is because most people don't know how to think. We don't know how to think. We even deny that the law of non-contradiction actually agrees. You know what the law of non-contradiction says? It basically says this: a statement that is making two mutually exclusive affirmations cannot actually be true. And you say that at a university campus, and they're not sure it anymore. At the University of Florida, Gainesville, a student went up to the microphone after I'd finished talking and said to me, "How do I know that I exist?" I suppose he is paying his fees. I suppose he's showing up at classes. These things are hard to believe, but thank the Lord we have them on video. So he says, "How do I know that I exist?" I said, "May I quote Professor Nathan from the University of New York? And who, shall I say, is asking?" One student at the University of Iowa went up to the microphone and said to me, before I could even take a sip of water before answering questions, she said this: "Who ever told you life needed to be coherent?" She said, "Where do you get this idea from? That our arguments need to be coherent, that our logic needs to be coherent. Is this not another one of these Western ways of dominating the world and believing reason and logic need to be coherent?" One thing I've learned, you allow anybody to talk long enough, they end up actually convicting themselves. And so once she finished, I said, "I have just one question for you. Do you want my answer to be coherent, or may I be incoherent in answering you?" I said, when you deny the law of non-contradiction, you may as well talk about a one-ended stick. Can you picture a one-ended stick? We don't want to be coherent. It's a Western idea to be coherent. I thought when you're incoherent, they had other solutions for you. That's what's happening. Most people don't know how to think anymore. The art of reasoning and logical thinking is gone. And the third deduction is this: a nation has reached its lowest ebb, determined by what we do to our children. Manasseh offered his children to the burning arms of idols. If you go to Jerusalem today, there's a valley of Hinnom. It was named after Manasseh. He used to burn children in the burning arms of an idol. Gehenna, the place of hell. People called it the Valley of Hinnom because they thought that's what hell must be like. Screaming, agonizing pain, and an amber-colored sky around them. That's the way people named it 2,500 years ago. That name still stands. What do we do with our children? And I'm a father of 3. And I've traveled half my life. I regret some of that. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it this way. And I wish I could take back some of the years when they were little and wanted to talk. I'm so grateful to God for protecting them. They're all in Christian service today, but it's not because of any credit to me. My loss from those years that go by so quickly, when they jump into bed at 11 o'clock at night, just when you're exhausted, they're coming to life. And they want to talk. I wish I'd stayed awake during those nights and listened. Watching my son play T-ball. I didn't know what T-ball was. I grew up in India. I played cricket. I thought T-ball was you go and watch them play ball and they serve you tea. Patricia went to see the doctor. The doctor said to her, 100% deformed, abort. 100% sure. She wouldn't. Put pressure. She moved to another doctor. It's a true story.